Hey guys, so allow me to welcome you back. It's been a while since I made a last tutorial. I got pretty sick and couldn't really do much during the last 2 months. So I'm back now, and I did create a layer for a Metaplex environment specifically for developing, extending Metaplex smart contracts and node functionality. So what I'm going to do during this tutorial is to show how to use it. So in order to use it, we need actually two repositories. One is the Solana dev env, which is in my GitHub, and the other one is also in my GitHub Metaplex program library. This is a branched version. The name of the branch is local dev env. This is where I was developing this particular development layer. I'm not sure if it's going to get merged anytime into the main Metaplex foundation branch. We'll see how that goes, but for now I'll show you how to use it. So let's take a look at these two branches. The Solana local env repository consists of actually a Docker setup. So if we take a look inside this Docker compose, we see that there's a soldev service and then there's a Verdaccio service. So soldev service is where we do all the development. This is where we have Rust installed, Solana installed, npm installed, yarn installed, so this is a container for developing things. And if you don't know what Docker is basically a virtualization system to separate a development environment from your main computer. This way, in case if anything goes wrong in your development environment using Docker, you will not have to hunt down which packages are causing what problem. Just basically remove the container itself, reload the image, reset up the container, and everything will start working as it should. So here we have two containers, soldev and Verdaccio. Soldev, like I said before, for developing smart contracts and npm stuff. Verdaccio is like a local npm registry, because you will need this when you are working on the code for example, Metaplex Foundation JavaScript code. You won't be able to upload it to the actual npm Foundation npm registry, right? Because you will not have access to it, and no one would want to do that because of the security reasons. So that is one. That is why you need your own local npm registry to test things. At the same time, if you're going to be working on smart contracts or extending Metaplex smart contracts, you will not have the ability to use the original keypairs that are for the original Metaplex. Again, security reasons. Only a few people within Metaplex probably have access to those keys, so that no one goes in and messes around with the smart contracts without them knowing, right? So you will need to set up your own. However, all of the code inside of this Metaplex repository, specifically here, if we go inside this, like all the code inside these smart contracts and JavaScript code inside there, it is all linked to the original keypairs, to original public keys. So you will need to switch that out, and this is what this development environment does. It switches it out automatically and saves it inside. If I go to this branch here, local dev, and if it saves it inside, where's my utils folder, please? Here, utils and setup. Over here, there's a keyring and keyring JSON backup. So keyring JSON backup is the original. So all these are the original keys. And when you actually run the transformation function, the default keyring will get updated with one extra key, which will have your own public keys for every new key pair that has been generated. So without further ado, let's start working on this. And I'm going to follow these instructions that I created. So I'm going to switch here. And here we have local dev md. So this is for setting up. This is for second part of the setup. At first, we have to do this one. We have to first set up the Solana local environment. So over here, we also have environment setup. I'm going to go into my terminal. I'm using Ubuntu Linux. I've been using Ubuntu Linux since forever. You can also install Docker on Windows as well. The setup instructions will be different, but you can always check the Docker website for that. So if I go to Docker Hub, not Docker Hub. Docker Hub is where there's all the Docker images. So if you go to Docker and you go to products. For Windows, I think you will need to Docker Desktop. There it is. So you can basically set up Docker Desktop for Windows. Just read up this information here. I haven't used Windows for a while now myself. I've been using Ubuntu for past 1.5 years. And honestly, I haven't been using Windows for development for like 4 years now, because Linux has pretty much everything I need, including even stuff for working with graphics and all the videos I even make on this Ubuntu setup. So I guess you'll need to read up the documentation here on how to set up a Docker on Windows here. On the Mac, it's about the same as Linux. You just install it using command line, and that's it. Anyway, let's continue with the tutorial for now. Two things you need is Docker and Docker Compose. Just look up, there's plenty of tutorials on how to set this up. I'm not going to go over this right now. I'm going to start with the tutorial and with the first instruction to get this Git cloned into the folder of my choosing. So I'm going to run this, and I'm going to call it solenv actually. There we go. Going to go inside that. Now the next step is to create the actually next step is to change the we're going to do a little permissions management here. So I'm going to paste it here. I actually mistyped it. I'm going to have to update this tutorial. So we need to set the what this does is sets the ownership. So I'm going to switch ownership of everything recursively inside this folder to the username ID 10,001 and group ID 65533. This is a Linux command for setting ownership of a particular folder or file. So now if I look inside it, you can see that it's been set, right? The config has been set to these values here. Now I'm going to make this folder here, mkdir appdev. And there we have this folder. And this is it. Like, this is all we need to do for this part of the setup. The next part of the setup is to set up the actual Metaplex program library. So we go over here, we switch part one, go inside the appdev. So we're going to cd appdev. Okay, now we need to clone the Metaplex Git repository in here. Specifically the Metaplex program library repository. Let's do that. So here we are inside the we have now Metaplex program library. Now we're going to cd into it, and we're going to switch our branch, because right now if we go git branch, we're on the master, and that is not the branch that we need. It doesn't have the new setup that I did. So we're going to do a git checkout local devenv. So it switched to that branch, and I'm going to go git pull, and we're good to go. Now I'm going to do a yarn install. Oh yeah, before we do that, we actually need to go inside the container, and we need to start up our Docker containers. So yeah, this is what I missed here. I have to go back and start the actual container. So Docker Compose up-d, right? So we have the Docker Compose YML in here. This is actually one of the reasons I don't set up npm and yarn and everything like that on my main system, because I do not want it to Like, see right here, if I did yarn install, it would have set up everything the way it was, but it wouldn't have been inside the container. It would have been kind of on my host computer. But now, since I don't have yarn installed on my host computer, it didn't work, and I figured out that I forgot to start up the container and everything like that. So let's just start up the containers now. So right here you see two containers, Verdaccio and SolDev, have been installed, have been started. For you, when you first run this command, it will actually start downloading a bunch of stuff from Docker Hub. So over here from Docker Hub, I have all these different images. So the one that we will download is this guy right here from Solana No AVX2. I actually had to compile that image for my CPU because my CPU does not support AVX2. Later on, I will also compile an image with just a regular AVX support. But for now, I couldn't really test it because my CPU obviously doesn't work that way. So it will pull this image, and it will also pull a Verdaccio image as well. And now if we do docker ps, you can see here we have SolDev and Verdaccio images running. So I started them 52 seconds ago. Now we're actually going to follow the instructions further. We actually need to sign into the Docker container now. So I'm going to take this command and I'm going to paste it here. And as you can see, my command line changed a little bit. So we are now inside of the Docker container. So if I list something here, it is not on my root system, it is inside the virtualized container now. And over here we have the app dev directory. That is where we need to go next. So app dev Metaplex program library. And here's basically the same repository that we cloned on our host system, except it's linked into our Docker container. From here inside, we're actually going to do to run our yarn install. And have to wait here until it sets everything up. Now that we did a yarn install, the next step is to actually do our environment transformation. It is this command right here. It runs a few shell scripts and basically creates the key pairs that you need, transforms, extracts public keys from those key pairs, and sets them up, kind of replaces them, does a regular expression match replace, and replaces those keys throughout the entire repository. So that's what we're going to do right now. After it finishes replacing all that, it also runs cargo build in the end. So sometimes the cargo build on the end fails, and if that happens, you will need to run cargo build by itself again, just to try and recompile the Rust packages. But I'm going to run yarn set dev env, and let's see what happens now. So as you can see, it already generated those keys, and now it is starting to do a replace. It uses grep-rl, that's a Linux command to do a replacement. Inside of the Docker container, it should work no problem because Docker is Linux by default. So, I mean, Docker container is using Linux by default, specifically Ubuntu, and you shouldn't have any of these commands missing to run this. As you can see, while I was compiling, it did end up with some crap that decided not to compile. So what I'm going to do is run cargo build again. Hopefully it'll sort it out this time. Okay, this time it succeeded. See, for some reason, sometimes cargo build fails to build everything and compile stuff and just ends up with error, but just have to run it again. That's why I added this extra thing here saying, like, in case if it happens, just run cargo build after it, if it fails. Okay, the next step, step 11, we need to compile smart contracts. Before we do that, actually, let's go inside this directory, open code inside of our host computer in the same area, dev docker yt tutorial solana. It's going to be different for you, but I'm going to open my right here. Oh, what I'm going to show you is this utils, default keyring, and default keyring backup. Default keyring JSON backup stores all the original value of this file. Because this file is modified, it has public keys and dev public key. So pub key is the original from Metaplex Foundation, and dev pub key the one that has been generated for you and is now sitting inside of this target directory deploy. Like there's some of them here, and then there's another 3 contracts which don't actually store them inside of this main target. One of them is auction house. This one has its own, and the other one is candy machine and also gumdrop. Those are the 3 that store their own key pairs inside their own directories. Okay, now that we know about this, let's go back into our Docker container, to our terminal, and check what we're supposed to be doing. So over here we have our next step. Go back to the tab with the Docker container open, Metaplex program library. Our next step is step 11. So we have to compile these contracts. So let's do this. This is going to take a while because now it's going to be going through each and every folder, running either cargo build, BPF, or anchor build, depending on how the smart contract was written, and build all of the .so files using the public private key pairs that have just been generated in the previous step. So let's run this command and wait for a few minutes, I guess. Yeah. And this has been mistyped again. Okay, so this time everything seems to have compiled fine. So at first it downloaded the BPF SDK and then started to compile all the different packages that we needed. So we ended up with what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 smart contracts all together. And they're all compiled just fine. So we're good to go now. Now let's take a look what's our next step here. By the way, these steps are actually going to be changed, so the numbers will switch over a little bit because I already found a couple of problems while making this tutorial. I'll update it as soon as I can. Anyway, after we compile contracts, we actually need to push them to the validators. But in order to do that, we actually need to start one. So what we need to do is open one more window, so a separate terminal window. And now I'm going to log into my Docker container once again. Not soccer, Docker, please. Same thing. I'm gonna check if there's anything inside the test ledger directory, and there's nothing there. Now I'm going to run Solana test validator. Oops, forgot the hyphen. Make sure that you run it from the root directory of the Docker container. So here we see all this stuff coming up. So now it's doing all of its processing. We have our validator running. Now I'm going to run a deploy on this thing. So yarn deploy contracts. Yarn deploy contracts will airdrop some Sol into a preset wallet that we have, and then deploy all these contracts. Okay, so now that all the contracts have been uploaded, let's just do one thing quickly. I will put this thing next to this thing. And let's just verify these numbers. So 7 something and EIY should be here somewhere. And EIY 7 UGE, you see? Another one AKM 7JI. AKM 7JI. So like they correspond to these dev pub keys that we have in the end. Make sure that when you're developing your smart contracts, if you want to add some more, that you actually add the original uploaded keys to this list. Just create one more thing, like say like this gumdrop here, add another one, put whatever the public key is there and the key pair location, and then so that the system can find that key and replace it as well with development key. Okay, now that we did this, the next step that we have to do is actually to upload our npm packages. And to do this, we need to run one more command. Just yarn publish npms. This will actually publish it to our Verdaccio, and I will show you what I mean. If we go here in our Solenv on our host computer, we go to Verdaccio folder. Here we have a storage folder. It's empty right now. So right now I'm going to run the command. Make sure to run this command when your Sol development, your Solana validator, test validator is working. Because some of the tests that have to run during this push, they need the validator to be working in order for tests to pass. And while it's doing it, we'll also take a look inside of our Verdaccio storage. So you can see Metaplex Foundation has now showed up, and soon enough the rest of the packages will show up as well. Okay, so a few minutes later we have got all these packages saved on the Verdaccio repository. If at any point you want to delete these packages, you can just delete this folder right here, Metaplex Foundation. You can either do it using the GUI way or the way described in the tutorial here. Yeah, right here. You could just delete it from Verdaccio storage Metaplex Foundation when you are inside of this directory. There's a Verdaccio here. Okay, so we're pretty much done setting this up. There has been a hiccup, however, in this Metaplex package. What's happening here is when it's doing a test, where is this test? Over here, this particular line fails. So I had to comment it out, and a few others here, which I don't know why this is happening right now. So if anyone can find out what is causing it, it'd be nice. But I had to already post this Metaplex layer and make the video quick so that people could already start using it if they want to. All right, so now that's done. Let's go on to the very last step. After you've done everything, after you've done working with smart contracts, JavaScript files, whatever, and you want to switch it back to pre-git post state, you need to run this yarn onset devenv command. So we're going to copy this thing. We're going to be inside of our Docker repository. Inside of our Docker terminal. I'm going to clear everything and list where I am. So I am at the same level as this yarn lock and package JSON of the Metaplex program library. And I'm going to call this yarn onset devenv. And it will actually reset all the public keys to what they originally were, so that you can then do a git status, git add, and all those other things without changing the keys in the original repository. And the repository has been reset. We're going to go inside and take a look just to make sure. I'm actually going to show you one thing, one trick with Docker Compose. Right now, this particular one is open inside of our, where is it? Inside of our solenv directory, the same layer as the Docker Compose YML. You can see it through our, look here, it is solenv, right? Docker Compose, everything is here. What we can do from here, we need to have a particular extension, this Docker extension right here installed. What that allows us to do is it gives us this tab right here. When I go to this tab, here you can see all of my different containers that are currently working. The one that interests us the most is under solenv, this anchor no AVX. I just right click it, attach Visual Studio Code, and now this instance of Visual Studio Code is working inside of the container. So now I'm hooked directly into the container. This terminal is also hooked directly into the container. So if I list whatever is here, it is listing me the directories inside the container here. If I list what's inside the root, you can see right here test ledger and everything that we saw in the previously. And if I now list, for example, root test ledger, what's inside there, as you can see, there's plenty of stuff there because we currently have our ledger working. It's already saved a bunch of stuff, the Solana test validator, right? So we're just going to quickly check. I'm going to close all these files. We're quickly going to check what happened to our default keyring. As you see, our default keyring does not have the third value anymore. It has been reset to the original because we ran that reset command over here when we ran the yarn unset devenv. And now we can do from the master, when I go to cd app dev meta from library, over here if I do git status, actually, yeah, I did have to change some of these files here. I will commit them today. But the idea is that these files, they do not have the actual any of the public keys associated with them. So all the files that had their public keys changed, they're not on this list. They have been changed back, and therefore they are not going to be tracked by Git in any way, shape, or form. So this is how this layer works. These are the steps that you need to do. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope you like this system, and I hope that it will allow more people to work on Metaplex smart contracts and node packages without fear of breaking a bunch of stuff using their own public keys, public-private key pairs, I mean. Anyway, thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.